Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. Here's a sneak peek of one of the exclusive extended episodes that I offer to the podcast subscribers over on the Patreon. The link is in the show notes if you would like to subscribe and enjoy. All right. Hi, everyone. So, hopefully, you've all already had a moment to listen to the episode Returning to the Medicine of Womanhood, where I talk about my gender journey. If not, I would suggest listening to that episode first, just so that you have a little bit more context as to where I'm coming from with this extended episode. But essentially, I would love to share some resources with you guys that really supported me in my process of realigning with my biological sex as a woman. And I'm going to begin by noting two things that I didn't note in the podcast episode, which was one, pretty much all of my community when I lived in New York City for I don't know, between 5 or 7 years, my entire community was queer people, many of whom were moving through explorations of gender. So either non-binary or gender fluid or transgender people. And I share that because it's pretty remarkable to me that that was like my entire community, and yet I knew quite literally nothing about what trans healthcare actually entailed and the medical process and also consequences of medicalizing transgender care. So that's something that I touch on a lot with these resources. That's why I share it. The second thing is that I didn't touch on how my coming into an understanding of my female autism actually really shifted my vision of myself as non-binary. And that's because there is a really, really big correlation when it comes to people who are autistic, undiagnosed autistic, and other neurodivergent diagnoses, but autism in particular. There's a very high overlap with autism and transgenderism. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'll talk about. But yeah, that was a big shift for me, and something that I do think is really interesting. As I said, I was in a community with pretty much all gender variant people who were not identifying with their biological sex. And a lot of those people were people who had been born as women or as little baby girls and who had been raised and socialized as female and then came out as non-binary or trans when they were like teenagers or in their 20s or maybe even 30s. And one by one, all of these friends started telling me that they were autistic. And I was like, what? You're not autistic? You're like the most normal person I know. Like, what? And it was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 of these people over the span of like 2 or 3 years. And I was super confused, but also like it kind of made sense to me because I, for a very, very long time, had suspected that I was autistic. I remember even being in college and Googling like signs of autism many, many times. And what came up never aligned from my experience, which is because the majority of research on autism has been done on young white boys of like middle and upper middle class kind of demographic. And so how autism shows up for that socioeconomic class and also that race and that gender is really misaligned with the expression of female autism and also how autism is expressed for people of color. There's very little research around all of that, but that's just to say that female autism is super, super different. I can link actually. This is not having anything to do with gender and like non-binary, trans kind of whatever, but I think it is helpful for me to link a great podcast about female expressions of autism because it does overlap a lot with non-binary and transgender identity experiences. So yeah, all of these friends were telling me that they were autistic, and I remember when I was coming into like my deep work with like realigning with womanhood, I said to my partner, I was like, babe, it's really interesting to me, and I don't understand why this is the way that. All right. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, please feel free to subscribe to the Serpentine Path Patreon, which is linked in the show notes. On the Patreon, you can also find more of my musical offerings, inspiration behind all of my songs, written pieces that accompany many of the podcast episodes, health and educational resources and recommendations, and much, much more. Your support for this project means the world. Thank you so much.